Good morning. My name is Pristine Thai, and thank you for having me today. Hacking is often portrayed in the media as directly attacking a high-security database of confidential information. However, in real life, data manipulation is more often achieved indirectly using easily accessible information or devices. These avenues of data manipulation are increasingly available thanks to the growing network of connected devices known as the Internet of Things, often abbreviated as the IoT. Burgess notes that 35% of US manufacturers already get their data from smart sensors, so the IoT will only continue to permeate American society and American politics. So to what extent can the Internet of Things, its data, and its security vulnerabilities indirectly affect election integrity in American elections? The answer to this research question is that the Internet of Things, its data, and its security vulnerabilities can all pose a profound threat to the integrity of American political elections, and it will take targeted, comprehensive efforts in order to protect election security in the future. Burgess quoted former U.S. National Director of Intelligence James Clapper in stating that the IoT could be used for identification, surveillance, and monitoring, stressing the extent to which the IoT affects personal privacy. In politics, data provided by the IoT's infiltration of this privacy already plays an important role that campaigns have to be mindful of. Campaign analysts already use both credit card data and registration rolls to target calls for financial support, aiming for people who are most likely to donate. Thus, the onslaught of information provided by the IoT is already a valuable and established resource for campaigns. That is not necessarily malicious. However, those seeking to harm campaigns can indeed manipulate IoT source data for less than honest causes. The graphic on the slide is a visual sort of pun representing how phishers, with a PH, attempt to gain private information from email accounts. Laura DeNardis, a consultant in internet governance, wrote that the more believable these initiatives are, the more effective they are. That means that if people who convey sensitive information via email have their personal IoT collected data mined, phishing attempts can be individualized to be more convincing, and successful phishing puts campaigns' internal communications at risk of being exposed or exploited, unfairly disadvantaging them compared to their opponents and possibly even skewing elections. It is important to understand that the vulnerability of IoT devices does not only lead to mishaps on the digital plane, which affects campaigns directly. Physical interferences are well within the range of consequences that affect voters in particular. For example, the Center of Internet Security, a globally recognized nonprofit at the head of IT safeguard innovation, warns that fire alarm systems can be remotely triggered or that heating systems can be shut off. This distracts poll personnel from voting day activities, which can delay the voting process and discourage voters from staying in line. Disruptions can also cause mistakes in vote tabulation. DeNardis further explains that targeted chaos can be created before voters even arrive at polling locations. The notification on the slide was shared by Katia Del Negro on Twitter, warning of a supposed tsunami in New York City. Although people are unlikely to heed such a blatantly ridiculous weather alert, this demonstrates the vulnerability of voters receiving misleading weather or traffic reports that have the capacity to be much more convincing. Voters may be convinced that they would not make it to the polls in time due to fabricated conditions, and combined with personalized data reflecting the political affiliation of a household or the average political lean of a certain zip code area, for example, these artificial deterrents can be politically micro-targeted to create unfair advantages. Some suggest that the Internet of Things can be used to establish internet voting. The visual on this slide represents this concept, where every computer with internet becomes a polling location. Professors of political science Alvarez and Hall argue that this would make it easier for voters to participate because it creates many accessible locations where no travel is needed and there are also no long lines to wait in. However, further introduction of IoT capabilities to elections will only create more routes of possible hijacking, such as the ones articulated earlier. This idea should not be put into action until existing flaws are addressed first, in the interest of maintaining election integrity. With all of these potentially devastating threats, To their fairness, elections must see continued efforts from officials to safeguard their security, which is demonstratedly lacking. States need to work with knowledgeable cybersecurity experts to create tangible effects. This includes passing ethics laws on how IoT collected data is used to discourage phishing, as well as securing infrastructure at polling locations so that it cannot be remotely triggered. The Pew Research Center found that 75% of jurisdictions that primarily use direct recording electronics do not produce backup paper receipts. Thus, in addition to work with cybersecurity experts, states need to improve these voting machines to provide these crucial safeguards. Finally, if voters do not see meaningful change, they must hold officials accountable, whether through direct dialogue or protest when necessary. Thus, issues in elections digital infrastructure have long been identified by experts. It is up to officials at all stages of government and politics to take serious action in response. Thank you. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Yeah, I have two questions for you. All right, first up, how valid and reliable were the sources that you used, and how do you know?
The sources that I used were of a high quality, and I believe them to be valid and reliable because they came from experts in their field. So these would be people who have decades of experience, including politicians, political officials, consultants, and also organizations that are reputable and well-known, such as the Pew Research Center and the Center for Internet Security.
And what additional questions emerged from your research as you were doing it?
Additional questions that emerged from my research, one that stands out to me was how voters can really get involved in this process, because a lot of the ability to create change within election infrastructure lies in the hands of officials who have the power to do administrative or legislative actions regarding this. So when it comes to voters, it was a challenge to see how voters could become part of this process aside from simply creating dialogue or protesting officials who aren't doing their job. So something that could be further researched is how grassroots movements can affect the infrastructure of elections and take their own initiative in beefing up cybersecurity.